A small German Shepherd puppy persists in trailing the officer in search of help. What she discovers brings her to tears. The morning was quiet. Officer Sarah was driving along an empty forest road, enjoying the peace and the hum of the engine, when suddenly she noticed a tiny shadow in the mirror. A little German Shepherd puppy was running behind her car, kicking up clouds of dust. He didn't stop. Sarah braked, thinking he was lost. But as soon as she got out, the puppy ran right up, barking desperately and looking straight into her eyes. There was something more than fear in them. He was calling her to follow him. Sarah slowly stepped out of the patrol car, squinting against the bright morning light. The air was fresh, smelling of wet earth and pine. The puppy stood a few steps away, breathing heavily. His little paws trembled with fatigue, but his eyes glowed with determination. "Hey, little one, are you lost?" she asked softly, squatting down. The puppy yapped quietly, then abruptly turned toward the dense forest and looked at her again, as if pleading, "Come with me." The police instinct kicked in immediately. Something about his behavior was not accidental. Sarah turned around. There were no houses, no cars around. Only the endless road and the hum of the wind between the trees. She sighed, touching the radio on her chest. "Dispatcher, this is Unit 7. I am on Route 19, 2 kilometers north. Following a possibly abandoned animal. Check the signal." But only silence and the slight crackle of static answered in her headphones. Sarah pressed her lips together and looked at the puppy. He was already standing by the roadside, persistently turning toward her. Then she took a step forward. Then another. "Okay, let's go," she whispered. "Let's see. What do you want to show me?" The puppy darted into the thicket, flashing between the trees. Sarah followed him, feeling her heart begin to beat faster. The forest accepted her with cold and silence. Every step echoed in her ears, as if she were crossing the border of something invisible. Something was telling her this was not just a walk after a lost dog. This path would lead her to something bigger. The forest met them with damp air and the smell of pine needles. Sarah walked slowly, trying not to make noise. The puppy ran ahead, stopping every few meters, turning around and whining quietly, as if checking if she was following him. "I'm here, don't be afraid," she said, adjusting the belt with her walkie-talkie. Twigs crunched underfoot, cold drops of dew settled on her shoulder. The sun's rays broke through the thick foliage, turning everything around into a pattern of gold and shadow. Everything would have been beautiful if not for the growing sense of anxiety. "Why is he leading me?" thought Sarah, looking at the tiny creature marching with such confidence, as if he knew the way better than any human. Soon the path became steeper. Mud appeared underfoot, tire tracks and dents. As if someone had recently driven here and left in a hurry. Sarah frowned. She stopped, turned on the radio. "Dispatcher, this is Unit 7. I have deviated from the route. Possible traces of an incident. Comms check, over." Only hissing in response. There was no signal. She bit her lip. By all rules, she should have turned back, but something inside said, "No, not now." The puppy was leading her for a reason. He yapped again and darted under a low branch. Sarah bent down and followed. A small hollow opened up before her, where the earth was churned up, as if someone had been looking for something or hiding. She froze. "What is this place?" she whispered, looking around. The puppy ran in a circle, stopped by a broken fence, and began to dig the earth with his paws, whining quietly. Something tightened in Sarah's chest. She slowly approached, took out her gloves, and crouched down. The earth was moist, loose, touched quite recently. Suddenly the puppy froze, flattened his ears, and retreated, whining quietly. His small body trembled. "What is it, little one?" Sarah crouched closer, but he only looked at her and ran forward again, deeper into the thicket. His bark became more persistent. Desperation. "Damn it." Sarah stood up and went after him, tearing through the branches. The wind died down. Even the birds fell silent. Only footsteps on the damp earth and ragged breathing. She was about to stop when she noticed something shining ahead, like a piece of fabric. Wet from the dew. Coming closer, Sarah saw a pink cloth, torn and dirty. Like a baby blanket. Her heart skipped a beat. The puppy stood nearby, whining quietly. His gaze was riveted to this spot. "Where did you find this?" whispered Sarah. She picked up the fabric, felt it with her fingers. On the edge was a small embroidered flower. A child's item. Sarah exhaled. Now she knew this place. Not just a forest. Something happened here. Something the little one was trying to show her. She looked at the puppy. He turned to the forest again and yapped quietly, as if calling her further. "Okay," whispered Sarah, gripping the blanket tighter. "I'm with you. Show me the way." And they went further, to where the air became colder, and the silence almost deafening. The deeper they went, the heavier the atmosphere became. Fog crept along the ground. The cold pierced through her uniform. Sarah no longer felt tired, only the anxiety that lived somewhere under her skin. The puppy walked ahead, no longer running, but moving cautiously, sniffing the air and whining. She said quietly, as if to herself, "What do you want me to see, little one?" The answer was a short, dull bark. And then she saw it. In a clearing between the trees lay something metallic. At first, it looked like a tin can. But approaching, Sarah realized, it is an overturned baby stroller. Nearby lay that same pink blanket, now completely dirty and wet. Sarah froze, her heart beating loudly. She took out a flashlight and crouched down. The wheels of the stroller were broken. One handle bent, around it were tracks, as if someone had dragged something along the ground. With every second, a bad premonition rose inside. The puppy barked loudly and began to scratch the ground a few steps from the stroller. The earth was loose, damp. "Hey, don't." Sarah stood up, but he didn't listen. He dug desperately, and suddenly she heard it. A barely distinguishable sound, like a quiet cry. She froze. God, it's a child. Adrenaline flooded her entire body. Sarah began to dig together with the puppy. Her fingers trembled, nails broke, but she didn't stop. The crying became louder. Seconds later, the edge of a blanket appeared from the earth, then a tiny hand. Sarah nearly screamed, carefully cleared away a layer of soil, grabbed the child, a tiny girl, all in mud, with blue lips, but alive. "Breathe. Breathe, sweetie, please." Sarah pressed her to herself, shaking off the dirt, and wrapped her in her jacket. The puppy stood nearby, whining quietly. His eyes glistened with moisture. The girl let out a weak sob. Sarah felt her breath catch. It's okay, little one, are you alive?" "You're alive," she whispered, rocking her in her arms. She took out the radio, pressed the button. "Dispatcher. This is Officer Mitchell. Urgent, I found an infant. I repeat, a live infant, evacuation and medics needed." There was no answer. Only crackling silence. Sarah grit her teeth. "Can't wait. Need to get out." She stood up, pressing the child to her chest. The puppy began to bark and ran forward again, as if showing the way. Sarah followed him, trying not to stumble. The forest was silent, as if watching them. Every step was a struggle with mud and branches. The girl whined quietly, but her breathing was there, and this gave Sarah strength. Minutes seemed like eternity. Panic grew in her chest. What if she doesn't make it? What if the signal doesn't catch? But then a light flashed through the trees. The road. Sarah exhaled, almost crying with relief. She pressed the radio again. "Dispatcher, this is Officer Mitchell. I am exiting onto the clearing. I have a live infant. Immediate assistance needed." This time a voice cut through the static noise. "Copy that. Unit 7. Medics are deploying. Hold on." Sarah sank to her knees, pressing the child to herself. The puppy sat nearby, tucking his paws. His breathing was erratic, but his gaze attentive and alive. Sarah looked at him and whispered, You saved her. You realized before anyone else. Sirens were heard in the distance. She smiled for the first time in all this time. The puppy pricked up his ears, and his tail twitched. The girl in her arms sighed quietly, as if answering. The sirens approached, but time seemed to slow down. Sarah sat on the roadside, pressing the trembling child to her chest. The girl breathed unevenly, her eyes were closed, lips pale, but her chest still rose. The puppy stood nearby, not stepping away, as if guarding them both. "Hold on, little one, hold on," whispered Sarah, feeling her arms go weak. When the ambulance appeared on the road, she jumped up, waved her hand, "Over here." "Faster." The medics jumped out of the car. One of them, a woman named Kelly, ran up first. "Did you find her?" she asked, looking at the child. "Yes, she was underground." Sarah's voice broke. "But she is breathing." Kelly carefully took the girl, wrapped her in a thermal blanket. "Hypothermia, but there is a pulse. She is fighting." Sarah exhaled. The puppy yapped quietly, as if asking if everything was okay. "She is in safe hands." "Hero," said Sarah, looking at him. "Everything will be fine." But when the ambulance siren died down in the distance, a strange cold remained in her chest. Who left the child in the forest? Why? This is not the end, she thought. This is the beginning. Later, already at the hospital, Sarah stood by the glass window, watching the doctors bustle around the tiny body in the incubator. The girl was now clean, tiny, with a bandage on her arm. They named her Hope. The puppy slept at Sarah's feet, curled up in a ball. His paws twitched, as if he saw the forest again in his sleep. Detective Hale approached her, a tall man with a tired face. "Officer Mitchell, you found her first, right?" "Not me," Sarah answered quietly, looking down. Hale looked at the puppy in surprise. "The dog?" "Yes. He chased my car, led me there. Without him, we wouldn't have made it." The detective took out a notebook. In that area, they found a stroller, blankets, and tire tracks. Perhaps someone got into an accident. "We will check." Sarah nodded, but inside she knew. This place was not accidental. The forest held a story of love and despair. The next morning they returned. Fog lay low. The sun barely broke through the clouds. Hale and a group of forensic experts inspected the place where Sarah found the child. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. "The tracks are fresh," said one of the experts. "Looks like a car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. Possibly 2 days ago, when there was a storm." Sarah stood aside, watching as the puppy walked along the familiar path again. He stopped, sniffed the ground, and barked quietly. "Something found, little one." Sarah followed him. Behind thick bushes, almost completely hidden by a fallen pine, lay a car, wrecked, with a shattered windshield and bent doors. Sarah froze. "God," she exhaled. Inside they found a woman's bag. In it, a driver's license. Laura Evans, 28 years old. And a photograph. A young woman with a child in her arms and the same puppy at her feet. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. "It's her," she whispered. "The mother." Hale nodded. "Looks like she tried to get out after the accident, but couldn't. Perhaps she left the child undercover to save her from the cold." Sarah sank to her knees next to the car. The puppy pressed against her leg, whining quietly. "You didn't just end up there by accident," she said, looking at him. "You went for help. You did what only a human could do." Hale came closer, took a silver bracelet with the engraving, Hope, out of the car. "Here is the name," he said quietly. "Hope." Sarah looked at the sky, then at the puppy. "So, she did everything right," she whispered. "Even dying, she saved her daughter, and he simply brought her story to the end." When it was all over, a light rain began to fall. Sarah stood by the car, holding the puppy in her arms. He was quiet, tired, but calm. "We will bury her near the road," Hale said. "She deserves it." Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Tears quietly flowed down her face, mixing with the rain. You did everything, little one, she said through tears. Everything you could. The puppy sighed quietly and laid his muzzle on her shoulder. Several weeks passed. The story of the miraculous rescue spread throughout the district. About the puppy who didn't give up and the officer who followed him into the unknown. Television, newspapers, social networks, everyone wrote about it. But for Sarah, it was not just a story, it was redemption. Every morning she woke up to a light whining at the door. The little hero, that's what she named the puppy, patiently waited for her to wake up. He grew stronger, but his eyes remained the same, intelligent, understanding. At the station, Hero became a local legend. Colleagues joked, "Well, officer, do you have a new partner now?" Sarah smiled, the best of all. But every evening, returning home, she thought about Laura, the woman they found in the car. Sometimes she dreamed of walking through the rainy forest, pressing the child to her chest, while the puppy ran alongside, and how later Hero, trembling from the cold, ran along the road to where someone would hear him. She knew she was doing everything right. In the hospital, baby Hope was gradually gaining strength. Her tiny fingers tightly gripped the nurse's finger, and her eyes opened more often. When Sarah was allowed to visit, Hero went with her. The room was quiet, filled with soft light. Sarah approached the crib. The girl lay in a warm blanket, on her cheek, a barely noticeable scar. A memory of that night. Hero sat nearby, froze, then slowly lowered his head onto the edge of the crib. Hope suddenly smiled. A light, barely noticeable smile, as if she recognized him. Sarah couldn't hold back tears. "See," she whispered, stroking the dog's head. "She remembers you." The nurse smiled. "Looks like this little one already has her own guardian angel." Sarah looked at Hero. Yes, an angel, only with paws and a warm heart. Later, giving a short interview upon leaving the hospital, Sarah said simple words, "This girl's mother saved her, and this puppy simply carried her love to the end." The photographer took a picture. Sarah in uniform. Next to her, Hero, and behind them the hospital, where a tiny child's hand was visible in the window. This photo was later printed in the newspaper under the headline, "Love Knows No Boundaries." Months passed, spring returned to the small town. The forest, once gloomy and cold, now stood green and alive. Sarah often came there not as an officer, but just a person, to sit by the place where it all began. At the foot of the old pine now stood a small memorial stone. On it was carved, "A mother's love does not die. It only finds new ways to live." Hero sat nearby, quietly looking at the forest, as if still waiting for someone. Sarah sat down next to him, patted his head. "She would be proud of you, little one," she said quietly. "You gave this world a miracle." The wind rustled the branches, the sun broke through the foliage, and everything around seemed so peaceful. Later at home, Sarah opened a notebook and began to write. Sometimes angels don't wear wings, sometimes they just have dirty paws, kind eyes, and a heart that doesn't know how to give up. She smiled, feeling Hero lay his head on her knees. "Thank you," she whispered. "For her and for me." Somewhere far away in the orphanage, baby Hope slept peacefully, clutching a soft toy in the shape of a puppy. And it seemed that even in her sleep she felt that same warm breathing that once saved her life. The forest fell silent, carrying within itself the story of a woman, a child, and a puppy who didn't give up, a story that Sarah would remember always.